in supply chain where so much is dependent on your ability to see and decide, it won't matter how sophisticated an algorithm we develop at Plus One. It won't matter how deep our convolutional network is. It won't matter how much data we can feed the reinforcement learning model. In the end, people are superior. We just are. It's a qualitative difference. So that's why our mantra is robots work, but people rule.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside.
Woo!
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornung, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. Updated Calendar himself, Jay Klaus. Jay, you are reorganized and reinvigorated. What's going on, man?
Domo arigato, my friend. Yes, I am excited that I have updated my Calendly, which is the gatekeeper to access of my calendar.
And by extension, access to you.
Yeah, I had opened up my Calendly very broadly while I was marketing the new cohort of Unreal, our accelerator, because it's a super front-loaded effort. And so if people wanted more information, or if I was doing onboarding roadmap calls with the new members, I just wanted to get it in as soon as possible. So I really opened up my calendar. It really screwed up how I normally structure my time. And I finally got back in there. So now I will only take meetings on Thursdays or early Friday morning. And it feels good.
Look at you specializing. You're specializing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wrote about it in my newsletter this morning, but I wasn't setting appropriate boundaries for my time, for myself or for others. And it was really messing with me and getting me out of the flow of how I like to accomplish things. So getting back on that train. You know, I really think that I have more or less created myself a virtual assistant with technology using some tools. I mean, it can't do creative tasks or real problem solving, but a lot of stuff that people spend time on, I've mostly automated with different software.
It lets you take some low intensity tasks that are maybe a little administrative and kind of off ship them. So you can focus on things that are a little bit more meaningful.
Things that need a human touch.
There you go. Speaking of needing a human touch, I think our guest today has a mantra that kind of fits that vibe.
That's right. Today we're speaking with Erik Nieves, the founder and CEO of One Robotics in San Antonio, Texas. One Robotics mitigates the persistent shortage of manual labor and allows factory personnel to flow from monotonous tasks to higher value work. Through the integration of off-the-shelf high-performance manipulators with their advanced vision capabilities, your robots will bridge the gap between steady-state volume and surge. One Robotics, to make it a little bit more simple, helps robotic technologies with the handling of packages from one place to another.
Yeah, it does two things, right? It identifies the packages in front of it and then manipulates them.
Yeah. And I don't know a whole lot about robotics. This is going to be one of my first deeper dives into the world of robotics with Erik here. But it does seem like robotics is a hot topic in the venture landscape right now. I know that Drive Capital here in Columbus, Ohio, has a focus on robotics. They just moved a robotics company from Baltimore to Ohio. Erik seems to have a lot of experience in the robotics realm, 25 years of experience deploying industrial robots for Yaskawa Robotics. The company was founded in 2015, and to this point, they've received $10.6 million in funding from Pritzker Capital Group, which put in $8.3 million in a Series A, and Schematic Ventures, which was a almost $2.5 million seed raise.
So one thing that I've noticed about robotics, and I have as limited insight as you do, so this will be a huge learning episode for us, is that they tend to start as stealth companies and then emerge with some huge Series A or huge seed or just some monster raise. And I'm curious as to why that is. I would expect it's hardware, but I could be wrong. It's more of a capital intensive business. You have smarter people working on it, so you have to pay them more. But I've noticed that trend, and I feel like I remember it happening with Boston Dynamics and a couple other just robotics startups. So I'm curious if that trend is real, if it's not real, if it's just something I read on the internet, but also just learning about how this is different from maybe some of the other startups we talked to on the podcast.
Yeah, interested in learning more about the cost drivers as well. This is our first company in San Antonio, Texas. We spoke with Brian Chambers from Capital Factory recently, and he spoke about San Antonio as one of the major cities in Texas. So this is our first dip into that realm. Plus one, having raised a Series A, we'll probably ask fewer questions specifically about the model and use this as more of a mechanism for learning more about the robotics industry and hear Erik's experience raising a Series A.
All right, Jay, are you ready to jump into the interview?
Yes, but wait 1 minute. While you guys are listening to this, if you have any thoughts about this episode, please tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm. And if you're listening to this on an Apple device, or if you're listening to this on iTunes, go on over to iTunes and leave us a review. We'd love to see your review, and it helps us bring on high-quality guests to the show. All right, let's talk to Erik.
But before we do that, let's bring in Rob McDonald, a partner at Taft, Steneus, and Hollister, to teach us about private placements and fundraising. Taft is a law firm known for assisting entrepreneurs across the heartland. As a reminder, the following remarks by Taft attorneys are for informational purposes only and are not legal advice. This information is not intended to create, and receipt of it does not constitute, an attorney-client relationship. No person or organization should act upon this information without first seeking professional counsel. Rob, thank you for coming on. How are things going down in Cincinnati?
Things are great. It feels like the weather's finally turning here. We're really excited.
Weather turning in Ohio, something I can look forward to at least a dozen times a year.
On an hourly basis.
You know, Rob, we talk to a lot of founders, and we often hear this idea of smart money. How do I identify investors that would be a good fit for my startup?
I always encourage startups to do as much homework as possible identifying potential investors. Now, more than ever, there are plenty of resources available to help founders with this, namely Crunchbase, AngelList, and PitchBook. Using these sources and Google, triangulate investors that invest in the dollar amounts the startup is targeting, invest in the vertical of the startup, and invest in the geography of the startup. Shockingly, if founders can triangulate these three things, usually we aren't going to be talking about a huge list of investors. From there, develop and use their network to get introductions so that you can avoid fruitless cold emails to investors.
Awesome. And if people want to learn more about Taft or yourself, where should they go?
The best place to go is www.taftlaw.com or my Twitter at RWM.
Erik, welcome to the show.
Glad to be with you this morning.
Glad to have you. On Upside, we like to start with a background of the founders. So can you tell us about the history of Erik?
Sure. So Erik, with a K, is a robot geek full-time. This is all I know how to do, and it's because I'm a failed physicist. So I went to college, got my degree in physics, knew I was going to starve, but all through college, I had worked my way through at a factory in Minnesota. Now, I'm from Texas, but I would take in every summer, trek up to the Northland, and spent the summer working at a cement mixer factory of all things. That first summer, my gig was to hold an 11-pound electric grinder in my hand and grind welds down on the body of a cement mixer drum.
That sounds heavy.
Yeah, heavy, exhausting.
Were you jacked after that? Like, you had to just be so strong.
Like my forearms and my wrists. So I did this for, the first summer, and, towards, the end of the summer, the foreman comes rolling up in his little cart. He says, "Erik, I hear you know something about computers." This is 1988, 87. I don't know what he's got in mind. I don't know that much about computers, but whatever he's thinking about has got to be better than me holding this grinder in my hand all day. So I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure." And he says, "Well, we've got this machine over here." And he points me in a direction. He says, "We bought it and nobody knows how to make it run." And it was an industrial robot. And hey man, RTM. I read the manual and life got a whole lot better. I'd put some parts in this machine. I'd hit a green button and I'd sit down for like 20 minutes. And I got a raise out of this gig. So I did that every summer after that through undergrad. And after graduation, My fiance at the time and I were getting ready to grad school. And he says, hey, why don't you stick around for a year, skip grad school for a little bit. Would you help us install 2 more robots like the one you've had running? Long story short, I did that. Ended up going to work for the company that made those robots, Yaskawa, and was there for 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty much spent my adult life putting robots in manufacturing plants all over the country. In 2015, saw a new opportunity to bring that technology to a new space, logistics and supply chain. And so that's what we do. We teach old dogs from Detroit new tricks, industrial robots, how to be effective in a new area.
Super interesting. So what was it about that opportunity or that company that kept you there for 25 years when you had the initial itch to go to grad school?
Yeah, so robots are cool, and I was in robots early. So this would have been 1990 when I graduated and went to work for them. I think I was like the 56th employee, and they've got hundreds now. And I think the best part of the automation world is the fact that you see something new every day. It's like living episodes of how it's made, week after week after week. And so you see the, inside of all these different processes and such. And it was just fascinating to me. Everything is varied as laser cutting on car components to water jet application to assembly to who knows what all. To this day, I'm still involved in a project that we worked on for NASA for satellite servicing, where they have this notion of grasping satellites in orbit and refueling them, which was something they were never designed for. It was supposed to just use up the gas, and when it was done, kind of either rot up there or fall back to Earth. And instead, we're helping them, sort of extend the viable life of satellites. I mean, how cool is that? It's robots in space. Yeah, I'm in. So I did that for a really long time.
Did you grow up as someone who was really into sci-fi? Because you seem really jazzed about this now, and I love it. But was this how you always were kind of growing up, or did it kind of click?
Yeah, it kind of clicked. I was a sci-fi guy, but I wasn't a hardcore, Star Wars or Trekkie or Trekor or what have you, right? My thing was Asimov, actually. And it wasn't the whole robot series. It was actually Foundation.
I don't know what Asimov is.
Oh, Isaac Asimov.
Oh.
So the writer, he's the one that declared or penned the 3 rules of robots, right? A robot shall not cause harm to a human. Rule number 2, a robot shall not cause harm to itself unless it violates rule number 1. And this is sort of series of rules that we all kind of adopted in this space as offhand. And Asimov was that guy. But when I sort of fell into the industrial version of robotics and saw that, this stuff really applies to solving problems in the real world, in industry and application, that was pretty exciting. I'm old enough to remember when folks would say, you don't want to buy a car that was built on Monday or Friday. And that joke is gone out of our lexicon anymore.
Yeah.
Because of the, sort of repeatability and the process control that factory automation has brought. And that was kind of a cool thing to watch happen.
I hadn't heard that joke, but hearing it, it was pretty obvious to me what that meant.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned that you RTM, you read the manual, and that's how you kind of got started with this first robot. Is that how a lot of your peers also got into robotics? My assumption had been that there must have been some heavy studying and research involved to get into this field, and it seems like you just kind of went into the practical route the entire time.
The truth is, at that point in time, there were no robotics programs you could graduate from. Right? So most of the early industrial robotics people are electrical engineers or mechanical engineers that just moved the direction of factory automation and then found themselves in robotics. Anymore, that's not true. So, at +1, we get the opportunity to, have master's level graduates from Carnegie Mellon or Georgia Tech or a number of schools that have proper specific disciplines in robots and automation. But back then, it was kind of catch as catch can. And the truth is, the folks at Yaskawa at that time, they were less interested in the fact that I had programmed one of their robots and more interested that I had worked in college teaching high school physics. And they said, hey, that's really the skill set we're looking for. I went there as an instructor. I was teaching people how to program and maintain robots for the first few years I was there.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about your career arc with that company being there so long. What changed for you over that period of time?
You're someplace for as long as I was and do a lot of things. And I started out sort of setting up their, training facilities and getting, college level CEUs accredited for that type of coursework and such. And then in 94, we moved to Mexico. My wife had just finished her master's in ESL, needed to work abroad to sort of round out her resume. And I was afforded the opportunity to open the subsidiary for Yaskawa in Mexico. And that worked out just great. It was supposed to be a 2-year stint, a la the Peace Corps. Ended up staying 4.5 because we really enjoyed our time down there. The business needed that much time to sort of mature and get its own legs. But, I never did go get an MBA. But 4 years setting up a subsidiary abroad, it teaches you a lot. And that was really an important part of my sort of development in this industry. I came back and I started running, effectively the R&D group. I did that for a number of years, spent some time running customer service on the West Coast for a while, and then ultimately was the technology director there. And that's what led me to finally separate and found Plus One. It's 2009. The recession is in full effect. Anytime the automotive industry sneezes, the robot industry catches the flu, right? And we had to go find other things for robots to do. What was that going to be? And it was my team, along with my colleagues in the marketing department, that turned over a bunch of rocks. Aerospace, biomedical, surgical. This is 2009. Everybody believes, Da Vinci's are going to be the future. So all industrial robot companies explored these things, and you figure out pretty quickly, no, that's not where we need to be. And it effectively came down to two major markets that were going to be the next industries to adopt our technology in a big way. One of them is electronic assembly, all our glowing screens. And the second is supply chain and logistics, because they're the only ones that can absorb, that take so much labor that automation has a role to play. And the truth is, electronic assembly is a better fit for industrial robots than logistics is. It's about manufacturing and repeatability and precision, a lot of the things, the concepts that robot people are comfortable with. But I wasn't excited about that because no matter what I developed, it was always going to go to Malaysia. It was always going to go to, Southeast Asia or China, and we would never enjoy the benefits of it here. But that's not true with supply chain. By definition, logistics is always local. And I was jazzed about, okay, let's teach robots to work in this new space, and that'll make a difference here.
And at that time, you mentioned that you went to Mexico for about 4.5 years, and that was mid to late 80s. You came back then, I'm guessing, to San Antonio in Texas around 1990.
Yeah, the other way. I joined Yaskawa in 1990, went to Mexico in 94, came back in 99, and back was not to Texas where I'm at. It's actually to Ohio, where all the robot companies are in the Rust Belt. I was there all the way until 2015.
Where were you in Ohio?
In Dayton, actually.
Okay. Jay lives in Columbus and I live in Cincinnati, so.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, then you passed Yaskawa, went north on 75, right there in Springboro. You'll see us off to the left.
I see. So, okay, so now in 2009, you're in Ohio. You're starting to turn over these rocks. You see, okay, it's electronic assembly, it's supply chain. I'm guessing then you took that back to Yaskawa and you said, let's focus on supply chain. What did that look like for Yaskawa's business? Yeah,
so Yaskawa says, okay, let's do this. And we start trying to understand what are the technology gaps. Hey, Erik, if this is such a great idea, why aren't there 1,000 robots a year going into this space now? Well, it's because there's technology gaps. In the logistics world, it's almost orthogonal to manufacturing. Because in manufacturing, what do we care about? We're going to make 1 million of the same widget over the next 4 years. You just need to have physical memory and endurance. But in supply chain, I don't know what's going to come down the line next. I don't know what you ordered on your favorite e-commerce site that I need to manage coming down the line next. So you have to discover everything. in supply chain, it's less about the arm and more about the eyes and the hand. And you kind of know that intuitively, right? So Yaskawa, being an arm company, says, okay, well, let's see what we can do about making a proper arm for that space. Well, that's not going to effectively break the market open because it's not about the manipulation, it's about the perception. And that's what we ended up having to found Plus One to go do.
How much of the eyes at that time had been like created in an academic setting? Like how much of this work had actually been done before you were like, we need to take this to Plus One? Was there so much creation happening, or was it, we just need to aggregate a bunch of things that are happening, test it, make it work?
Well, first, there's this qualitative difference between 2D perception, 2D vision, and 3D vision. 2D vision was a well understood, established technology that all robot people were applying in manufacturing applications. But 3D is what's necessary in supply chain. You got to know everything's depth, where, and that's what was emerging at the time. So the academics were all playing with it. There were some startups, particularly out in the Valley, that were looking at applying 3D techniques to industrial applications, but nobody from sort of the delivery of the system, perspective. What really got Plus One going was a group out of Texas called Southwest Research Institute, SWRI for short. And SWRI is a not-for-profit contract research house. They had taken some internal development dollars to pursue what we call today the cluttered pile problem. If I have a whole mess of boxes, envelopes, padded mailers, etc., how do I sort them out one at a time to feed the rest of the system? And that cluttered pile problem is ubiquitous in supply chain. You can imagine it in an e-commerce fulfillment center. You can certainly imagine it once it hits the parcel, shippers. So they had built this piece of technology and had nowhere to go with it. And so Plus One is 3 co-founders. It's me, but Paul and Sean were at Southwest Research. Sean was the developer of that solution. And ultimately, that's what we did. We took the developers, we acquired the source code, and that's what gave Plus One its kind of commercial start.
So did Plus One spin out of Yaskawa, or did you say, I see an opportunity, it's time for me to go out and do my own thing?
Not a spin out. I left for the purposes of doing this. In some ways, we could have been considered a spin out from Southwest Research Institute because it was 2 of the founders and the technology. But likewise, they weren't able to do that. Unlike SRI that lives on spin-out, SWRI doesn't, sort of have that charter. So the only way to really do it was for Paul and Sean to separate and us to acquire the technology.
So Yaskawa, I would assume, has more resources than Erik the individual. So were they not interested in incubating it in-house, or were you not interested in incubating it in-house?
It became clear that no arm manufacturer was really going to be able to solve a perception problem. Robot manufacturers are in the business to sell iron and motors. And what we were looking to do doesn't fit directly with that. So it was going to be, we're going to be an enabling technology. Ultimately, that enabling technology is going to move iron, but we're going to have to go do this.
I see. Well, before I start sort of speculating then, can you explain what Plus One Robotics is today and the breadth that it is today?
Yeah, so you can think of Plus One as a 3D perception company that's bringing that technology to these industrial applications and supply chain. So what we're about is vision-guided manipulation. You have a robot arm. That robot arm has a set of cameras associated with it. Sometimes they're on the arm. Sometimes they're off board, but they are visualizing the scene, and through our technology, we can command the robot what to do next, where to go next, what to pick next, where to put it, etc. That's what Plus One does. But we come to this from the premise that people are better than robots. And that's certainly true at everything associated with supply chain. In manufacturing, I would argue people are better than robots at everything except stick-to-itiveness in mundane tasks. But in supply chain, where so much is dependent on your ability to see and decide. It won't matter how sophisticated an algorithm we develop at Plus One. It won't matter how deep our convolutional network is. It won't matter how much data we can feed the reinforcement learning model. In the end, people are superior. We just are. It's a qualitative difference. So that's why our mantra is robots work, but people rule. And the notion is, how do we seamlessly integrate people's capabilities to robot capacity, right? How do we take the best of the robot, its endurance and its strength, and mate it to the decision-making that sometimes you just have to have from a person? And frankly, that's why we're called Plus One Robotics. Because as we see this network of robots in the field, we view them as becoming much more capable, fault-tolerant, through the addition of a person, a human being. So the Plus One is really you.
Is that a mantra that you developed over your career? Or is that something that you and your co-founders kind of sat down and said, this is the vision we want for the company going forward?
No, it is something that I have come to over, the 30 years I've been doing this. Is, whenever you watch a robot do its thing, if it's anything beyond a rote assembly task, you'll watch and go, wow, that was a dumb decision it made, right? And, it should have picked differently than it did. And the other is, just think in terms of what happens to a robot when the upstream process goes down. You know what that robot's going to do? Absolutely nothing. But think about if a person had been there and the upstream process went down. That person would turn to their colleague and go, well, my line's down. Let me help you with yours. If there's nothing to do, that person would at least pick up a broom and clean the air. The robot's bringing you no value when the upstream process, when it's starved. People are much more flexible and capable than robots are. And that's just sort of our ethos at Plus One.
Let me repeat this back to you and make sure I'm understanding kind of the order of operations. You're at Yaskawa, you're looking to solve this problem. You discover the Southwest Research Institute, their approach to the cluttered pile issue, and you say, you know what, I think I have a better chance accomplishing this if I go out on my own and move back to Texas to work with that team. Is that all correct?
One caveat. I had moved back to Texas by then.
Okay.
I moved back to Texas in 2005 because it was time to come home and take care of my people. As a result, I'd had a lot of contact with Southwest Research naturally, and I supported some of their initiatives and such. So it would, in fact, be more correct to say that, folks at Southwest Research said, this is a real opportunity. And, we want to partner with somebody from the industry that we know and trust. And that's how, I came to be involved.
So what does the physical manifestation of your product look like? It sounds like there's probably sensor components and software components, but are like the sensors the extent of hardware?
Yeah. So the Pick One system, as we call it, is a set of 2D and 3D cameras, and it may be more than one, depending on the application, and an industrial PC. So that IPC is running our code on it, and it's all Linux, based work, and it's built a lot on the ROS framework. So ROS, Robot Operating System, is an open source effort at trying to broaden or democratize robotics more broadly. It came from some efforts in Silicon Valley that were aimed really at personal robots and your home, aid robots and that type of thing. And it was actually Sean who, while at Southwest Research, understood the benefit of bringing ROS tools to industrial applications. He said, hey, a lot of the things that they're doing for autonomous driving, swarm control, perception, all of these things that they think only mean something in mobility have a lot of benefit to us in industrial applications. Well, the folks out at Willow Garage, this is the incubator that birthed ROS, they had no idea. To them, industrial automation was a solved problem. Why should they even care about that space? But Sean, having to deliver industrial applications, says, no, listen, this is a thing. And that's what became ROS Industrial. So ROS Industrial is like a SIG. It's a special interest group for open source robotics. And, it's a very successful open source project in robotics. It's got a lot of backing from industry, Caterpillar, Ford, Amazon, you name it, that are supporting that effort.
So I'm trying to understand a little bit more here on the timeline. When you guys come up with this idea, or Swery comes up with this idea, they say, we're looking for an industry partner. They find you, and then you guys go into stealth mode. How does that, where does this all, walk me through this process of getting from, all right, this is an idea that we're going to pursue because it has legs. Now we're in stealth mode. What are you doing in stealth mode? And then why do you emerge out of it?
Yes. So we went into stealth because while we had brought some important customer contacts with us upon acquiring the tech, it wasn't baked yet. We were not in a position where we could commercialize what we had taken from the Research Institute. So we bootstrapped it for the first year, and it wasn't until April of 2017 that we took our first seed round from, of other people's money. And that helped us grow the team so that we could put handles on this software and wrap it up nicely and say, here it is. And there were, of course, some parallel efforts on the hardware side. What's the best sensor for this application? And as I said, this is kind of an emerging tech. So sensors were crawling out of everywhere. And some were great and some were lousy and some were terrific, but you couldn't get any support. And all of that you had to weed through until we got to a stable deliverable. And as soon as we had that, then we came out of stealth and announced the round and announced the product for the first time.
Give me an example of the type of customers that Plus One Robotics services.
Well, as you can imagine, this is an elephant hunter's world, right? Everybody you're talking to is a Fortune 100 company, right? So you can think in terms of e-com, retail, parcel, distribution, etc. And so, if you were to just think through all of the folks involved in getting you something that you wanted, we're probably talking to those folks. And, this industry is defined effectively by, 6 players. You get half of them and you're going to be really busy for a long time. So we're actively continuing to broaden our footprint amongst, all of these players.
How do you think about customer revenue concentration? So if you only have 2 of the 6, at any one point, if one of those 2 customers decides that they're just going to spin up their own in-house robotics using this open source industrial software, you're building a company based on 100% of revenues, and all of a sudden now you have 50%. So how do you think about the risk that comes along with selling to a consolidated industry?
Yeah, no, clearly it's a legitimate concern. And it's certainly one that we've had to work through as we raise the A. And, yes, there's this set of customers, and then you've got the next 100 that are all fighting for the same labor pool, that have the same, constraints, need the same solutions. They just don't need it at the same volumes. So, yes, you have to think in terms of what's the next level of the sales effort. And how do you access that market? Do we do that direct? Do we do that through distribution? Do we work with channel partners, et cetera, to continue to push our technology to the next level in this space? But clearly there's some concentration issues early, but it's ones we've chosen.
Is this deployed in production at any one of those customers yet?
Yes. So we have, on our website, you'll see the first application that we've done, which is induction. Meaning here's this big cluttered pile of parcels, and we need to take and put one of them at a time into the system. And all these customers have stage gates by which they deploy technology. And, we are working through those processes with them.
That was my next question, because I would imagine any downtime at all is a huge cost for one of these customers. So I was going to ask what stage gating looks like, what that implementation process looks like.
Yeah, so all of them, first every customer believes that their particular mix of widgets or packages is unique, okay? None of them believe that just because you did it for the last guy, it's going to work on there. So you end up having to do some upfront work, saying, okay, send me your stuff. I'll put it in front of the cameras. We're going to run it through the software, and you'll see that we legitimately can, discriminate the pick points adequately. So you go through that process. Then, well, let's go on site. And you kind of, do a proof of principle. Then it's kind of a next step pilot project where let's do one of these in a live kind of production environment. And then, wow, that's good. Let's take the next step and do a facility's worth, right? Or a line's worth. And then from there, you can go, indiscriminately through the rest of their facilities. So those are the stage gates that, you'll have to just work your way through.
And is that like all on speculation? Are they paying you to do these stage gates, or is that just like all part of the process of trying to court these customers?
Some of them would be happy to support that work. I've never taken a nickel from anybody for that. I want there to be exceedingly clear lines of demarcation regarding IP. So anything that we have done, I am providing the market a product, not an engineering service.
Who else is doing this in logistics? Because I remember seeing 4 years ago, 4 years ago, Amazon bought those little drone or those little like
Kiva
robots. Yeah. That go around everywhere. Like who else is doing things like this?
Oh man. Okay. So I'm going to back up and first say, look, if you were to step into a fulfillment center or a warehouse and just stand against the back wall, just watch, you'll quickly observe there's two classes of labor happening in the building. One of them is what I call the mobility class. These are people on forklifts, pushing dollies, dragging carts around, etc. Something associated with a wheel. That's the mobility class. The other class is people with stuff in their hands, the manipulation class. They're pulling things off the shelf, they're taping things, they're moving parcels around. It doesn't take very long for you to count noses and recognize there's a lot more people in the manipulation class than in the mobility class. But mobility is the easier problem to solve. Now, my mobility colleagues would argue on this, but it is a 2.5 degree of freedom problem. The robot goes forward, back, left, right, and it turns. And that's what Amazon did. If Amazon could buy a mobility company, they would. Oh, they did. That's what the Kiva acquisition was. If Amazon could buy, by extension, a manipulation company, they would. Oh, they can't. There's nobody to go acquire. So instead, what they did was created the Amazon Picking Challenge, the APC. And they did this for 3 consecutive years. And what it was an academic challenge. It turned out to be an academic challenge. They opened it to anybody from industry that wanted to, participate, but none of those would because of IP issues. And the way it worked was Amazon would say, here's a set of our widgets. Here's some models. We'll send you a shelf and you can program your robot to do picking and placing, which is what we need to do ultimately. And we all gathered in Seattle. And I think there were 11 teams. Don't quote me on that, but it's some handful of teams the first year. I was still at Yaskawa. I sponsored 3 of those teams. I'm telling you, it was painful to watch. All these robots were slow. Most of them picked nothing. I think we probably pushed over more shelves than we picked from. It was bad. And then they did it again a second year, and they did it again a third year. And they moved it from Seattle to, I think, the Netherlands and to Japan. And what was Amazon really doing? They were seeding the world with the manipulation problem. And today they have plenty of labs that are working on that problem for them, right? So to your question, who else is out there? The first thing you got to decide is who else is doing what? Because there's plenty of companies on the mobility space. Fetch, Six River, Locust, plenty of folks that have entered into warehouse automation from the mobility perspective. And now you're starting to see plenty of them on the manipulation side. So there's no lack of smart people putting cameras on robots to try to do vision guided picking.
So put me back in this warehouse. My back's against the wall. I'm looking. I see, okay, there's mobility, there's manipulation. There's a lot more manipulation than there is mobility. And I sub out all of the people who are doing manipulation, whatever ratio it is, to put in +1 robots. How many are there at like a DC? Like how many do you need? Is it? I feel like it would be an army of them if there's so many people doing manipulation now.
Well, I mean, no FC is going to, no warehouse, no material handling company is in the business of just bringing robots on to displace labor, right? That's the first fallacy. The problem is they can't get enough workers as it is. This is a labor availability problem, not a cost reduction issue. And again, from Plus One's perspective, if you believe people are better than robots anyway, we welcome that. I'll tell any customer, hey, if you can get the labor, you better, because they're way more effective and flexible than any automated solution is going to, bring into your building. But if you can't, if your labor is the shortage, if your human capital is the most valuable asset you have, then you better maximize it. And so what happens is in that building, there are some tasks that are less cognitively loaded than others. So let's think about just some applications. If your job is to just move stuff from left to right, okay? Here's what I'm going to move it from here, I'm going to move it from there. Not a whole lot of decision making going on there. Let's take and follow the rest through the rest of the facility. And now I have to take and build a pallet's worth of stuff. And it's all mixed. And some of it's heavy, some of it's solid, some of it's, sleeping bags, whatever. You have to make decisions on how you're going to do that. Those are ones no robot's going to help you with. So you had better take, if you need the human capital, you need to reassign it from those lower intensity tasks and move them to the higher intensity tasks where the robots can't help you. This is a augmentation play, right? So I actually try to stay away from the word automation because it has this connotation of people out, robot in. And that's not what you see in this space. In fact, I'll put it like this. No warehouse that put in a robot has ever resulted in a pink slip.
I guess to just kind of clarify my question a little bit, I'm trying to get a sense of the size and scale of how many of these things come in. So you said low intensity, we can specialize with robots, high intensity, specialize with humans who rule, right? Humans rule, yep. Robots work. Yep. How many of these things go into a warehouse? I guess that's what I'm like. I don't understand. Is it 10 and then you can knock out all of your low intensity work, or is it hundreds?
Yeah. So, your low intensity work is going to be counted in tens, not hundreds, right? So you'll be deploying the technology the first time on those applications. And then you can kind of just scale from there as the technology matures, as the facility becomes more capable, as the labor market gets even tighter, and the facility continues to expand, right? So it's in some ways no different than any time robots have been deployed, right? So when robots were first deployed in the automotive world, what were they doing? Spot welding, which was the easiest application to do. And that's what, put the foothold in place, allowed the industry to become comfortable with that technology, master the technology, and then you will always find other things for it to do. So what's tens today better be hundreds tomorrow, or Plus One chose poorly. Right?
I have kind of a silly, or what seems to be like a pretty simple question. There are some warehouses around Columbus here that I've talked to who have a real labor shortage, and they're constantly having high turnover because people don't show up or they don't have vehicles that are reliable. And I've always just kind of wondered, why don't you just increase the wages for those jobs to get a more capable laborer who's happy to go get that job? Where's the labor shortage come from?
I'll tell you, the labor shortage isn't just about the dollars. It's not just about the rate and the wage, right? Because George Bush was right, and I don't agree with him on a lot, but he did say that there are jobs Americans just won't do, right? And he was referring to ag, but the same is true here. The churn that you're talking about isn't just because it was so many dollars an hour. The fact is, it can be kind of crummy work. And a lot of times it's antisocial working hours. I mean, when do a lot of these sorts happen? It's overnight. So look, all of us knew somebody that during college worked at UPS loading or unloading trucks, but they're not doing it now because they have options. And that's the issue. When we have options, we'll find something else to do for the money.
Yeah. Another aside that I don't think we have a lot of people with insight on, and so I'd like to hear your perspective. You mentioned this Amazon picking challenge. And we frequently see just how much Amazon is doing all over the place, but it strikes me that logistics is specifically an area that Amazon excels that we don't have a ton of visibility into. So from your perspective, can you give us a short aside about Amazon, the company, and what you see from them on like an operational standpoint about how they've been able to dominate?
Well, I don't know that I can, but I can tell you that, the whole question of Amazon as shipper is the one that dominates a lot of the airspace right now, right? Is, hey, are they really coming after, FedEx and UPS, or aren't they? And I'm of the volition that they are not. And what they're really interested in is zone skipping, right? Where zone skipping is, that anytime you send a parcel out, it's going to go from your local hub to the main hub, whether that's in Louisville or Memphis, and then out to some secondary hub more close to you, and maybe a third before it gets out on the last mile. And that, all Amazon is trying to do with Prime Air is skip a couple of those zones and get maybe to the second to last one or the last one more readily on the, those markets that are significant to them. I think it's just a way to move the bar on delivery. I mean, when Prime came and we're getting stuff in 2 days, that was amazing. And now that's a table stake. And, major metropolitan areas, I'm sure Columbus is one of them, Cincinnati too, that are Prime Now cities. And heck, if I can't get it this afternoon, then I don't want it. So what does this do? This just keeps pushing the velocity issue at every turn. And so I just view Amazon as trying to stay ahead of the delivery issue. Now, the only other thing that I'd say is kind of on the, when is the backlash coming? And are we starting to see it? My wife and I are vegetarian. Whole Foods is a place that, would be natural for us to go shop. But, if we did, you could legitimately spend all of your dollars, except for gas, within sort of the Amazon umbrella.
Yeah.
And, I think that's ultimately what will cause the backlash, is we just don't like that sort of concentration. Right?
Yeah.
As a society, we just don't like it.
So earlier you mentioned that you're not selling an engineering service, you're selling a product. How do you price this product given just the kind of setup you have where you have these large potential buyers? Are you pricing on a per unit? Is there a continuous fee? Like how does the pricing work?
Yeah, I came into Plus One with the notion that everything was going to be robots as a service. We were all going to go to a subscription model and bow to the Salesforce tower, right? And maybe it's a function of just the scale of the users that we're involved with. But, subscription is not a catch-all for everybody. The automation world is a CapEx world. When they take and they buy a solution and it's going to have conveyors and equipment and such, they want to cut a check to somebody that delivers that whole thing, owns the responsibility of that, and moves on. So while philosophically you could make the argument that, hey, we're just augmenting your human labor with electromechanical labor, and it should be dealt with the same way from an OpEx perspective, they're not interested in that. They would just as soon, I'll take the equipment and the software license on CapEx, and we'll take the depreciation. That's what we do, right? So you have to first sort of establish the appropriate model, and then, kind of what's the value and the pricing that supports that.
What are the cost drivers in your business?
The cost drivers on us as the supplier side is all development. I mean, my burn rate is people. It's folks typing ones and zeros to make sure that we each time make the system more capable, make the software more adaptable and robust. So, that's where our money goes. Our customers' cost drivers are not just the direct labor dollars, but the churn associated with it. You're perpetually onboarding and offboarding, and surge capacity, right? that industry works, sort of a fallow level for 9-10 months of the year and then spikes at the end. And how do you float that much labor in and out of a market? That's a constraint. I think there's a real primer on the state of labor availability in this space by just going and Googling Amazon Camper Force. If you're not familiar with Camper Force,
I'm not.
Oh, it's worth checking out. I mean, I think there's like an off-Broadway play about Camper Force.
What?
But Camper Force is Amazon recruits in RVer magazines and says, hey, if you will park your RV next to one of our major installations, Hebron is the closest one to you. And if you'll come end of November, we will cover your, we'll pay you so much an hour. We'll cover your rent at a local RV space. And if you can manage to be here through the 22nd or whatever of December, we'll pay you a retention bonus or something, right? A bonus for having stuck around. And I don't know how many, what percentage of the Camper Force actually gets to that date to receive their retention bonus, because I'm just sure grandma ain't interested in doing, this motion and, putting stuff in slots for 8-10 hours a day for 5 or 6 days a week. I just don't think that, it's going to work. But that's how tight the labor market is in this space, that they've had to become creative and look at things like Camper Force.
See, that's great. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about with this picking challenge or Camper Force. This is stuff behind the scenes that there are people at Amazon constructing and architecting and implementing that we don't even see. That's probably a huge reason why incrementally they dominate so much. Something that you mentioned, Erik, was that the first year you were bootstrapped before you did the seed round, and now you've had a Series A. Given that most of your cost drivers are development, is that funding so that you can continue? Is it primarily so you can continue to the development on the product and making it better, or to afford what I'm guessing is a pretty long sales cycle?
You are correct that the sales cycles in this space are long, but that's not really what the driver is. The dollars are for taking this technology and then applying it in the next circumstance, right? So if you think about vision-guided manipulation as a capability, that capability manifests itself many different ways in this context of logistics. So we've knocked out these two sorts of applications, but there's always something more. And that's what we're looking to do, is increase sort of the application breadth that the technology can address.
When I first looked at Plus One, the first thing I thought was, man, maybe this can make recycling cheaper by picking up, because, right now, like recycling, 75% of it is just like BS, right? It just ends up going to a landfill anyway because people mix recycling and you can't do anything with the recycling process. So all I thought was, man, this could be like in the middle of a huge conveyor belt full of trash, just picking out and sorting information. So is that what you're kind of talking about? Different areas like that? Or is it something different?
I'm talking about directly within the material handling supply chain base. But your intuition is correct that, hey, if I can see, decide, and act, right, then I should be able to do this in this other context as well. Now, I am focused on doing it within the walls of a warehouse or a distribution center, but this same type of technology is being applied to that problem. There is a group in Boulder, Colorado that's doing just that, AMP Robotics. And this guy is my hero. His name is Matanya Horowitz. He's worth your time to go check out. But that's what they're looking at, is how do we facilitate single stream recycling so that it's real?
Robotics are pretty hot right now, it seems, and we don't have a lot of guests that have eclipsed the Series A mark on the show. So I want to ask a little bit of questions about that. It's a focus of Drive Capital here in Columbus. So I'd love to hear what Series A conversations were like for you and what type of information investors were asking in relation to the robotics industry.
My view on funding is it's less about our solution and more about finding those VCs that understand the problem you're solving. It's to the place where you have to get in front of those that know the industry that you purport to serve. They're the ones that are going to be the most receptive because they understand the pain. So that was my focus. The questions that we're going to get, and you brought one of them up, was concentration issues. Right? Another one is, okay, what's the legitimate TAM for vision guided manipulation? It's kind of hard to quantify because you can either say, wow, anybody that has one or two hands, qualifies. No, not really. There are other things that enter into that, sort of whittle away at it. So they're going to want to know, the addressable market. They're going to want to know what you have to deal with on sales cycle. They're going to want to know, hey, you guys aren't the only ones out there putting cameras on robots. There's 12 startups today. There's going to be another dozen tomorrow. The space is that hot. So what's the differentiator for this team? What is inherent in the DNA of Plus One that makes you think that this is going to be worth my dollars, time, and effort? And I'm bullish on Plus One because the leadership team is so strong, right? Because we've been delivering real systems to the real customers in the real market for many, many years. And I just believe that, that understanding, having all those relationships in the industry with the channel and the system integrators and such, puts us a step ahead of really smart folks coming out of, Berkeley or where have you, that just haven't had to do that, right? So those are the types of questions that we get at the A. Yeah, I mean, what do investors want to know? That this team's going to win, and that this problem is legit, and that there's a real path to a B, right? My view on that, and it's not very popular, is, look, I'm not here to do the Silicon Valley Shuffle. I've never seen the show. Got to put that out there. But I'm not here to do the Silicon Valley Shuffle. I'm not going to do seed A, B, exit. I was at Yaskawa for 25 years. My exit strategy is retirement. I'm building something here that is enduring. And that's why I believe that, this human in the loop piece is so important. That's what really helps it scale.
What type of feedback did you get from investors on that point? Like, if you're trying to build something enduring, usually, they're specifically looking for an exit strategy. How difficult was it to find an investor that was aligned with you on that mission?
You're right. If they are specifically interested in what's the valuation at your next round, then, we don't play that well. But you saw that Pritzker led our A. Pritzker is in it for the long haul. They understand. I mean, they do a lot of industry as it is. They're not uncomfortable with the direction that we want to take this. Of course, it's always true. Everybody's got a plan till you get punched in the mouth, right? And that's true of us too. I mean, we'll certainly look at anything that comes our way, but that's not what we're building here. I think you make different, and I would say less customer focused decisions if really what you're all about is, can I get to the B?
So if there's two paths, let's look past the B, let's to the very future. There's two paths. There's one where you service all 6 of those big customers in your own standalone company. And there's one that in 6 to 18 months, you get a $1 billion offer from one of them. Like, which one is more enticing? Because both of them you're going to retire pretty nicely.
Yeah, one might just get to do it sooner. Right. So, yeah, that's a fair question. I don't know that I've thought about it in those terms, but I am committed to seeing this technology develop, right? It would be a shame if, for whatever reason, good, bad, or indifferent, this technology stops growing in its capacity to serve. That was really my intrinsic motivation here, is I know how to make robots do the same thing over and over again. I want to teach robots to do different things every time. That is 180 degrees, and that's going to take time, effort, and my focus to do that. So, if somebody comes and says, yeah, $1 billion, but we're going to do with the technology what we think, and we're going to constrain it the way that we want to, that's going to be a hard sell for not just me, but for Paul and Sean too.
Obviously, San Antonio was important for meeting Paul and Sean and getting this started. Now that you guys are running Talk to me about San Antonio as an ecosystem and what it means for Plus One.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because that is a question that we got a lot, not even just at the A, but also the C. Was, hey, we're going to give you the dollars. We want you to move out here to the West, right? Or, Drive did that, right? They acquired the folks out of Baltimore, moved them to Columbus. Not interested in doing that. And I would argue it's not best. And this is why. Where is this all going? It isn't going to be very long that we're not going to care about robot arms anymore. And that perception will be, robust. And what you're going to have then is network connected assets in the field that you are having to, maintain, keep up, or whatever. What does that lead you to? That the two most important sort of technical risks are cloud connectivity and cybersecurity. So the whole Stuxnet, scare, nobody wanted that to happen to industrial robots. So if you're going to have them connected, it's got to be cybersecure. Well, that is the two things San Antonio does best. You've got Rackspace here, inventors of the cloud, and the U.S. Military Cyber Command is here. You can't swing a 40-foot rope in this town without hitting somebody that's doing cloud or cyber. And those are the things that really matter to the future of industrial automation.
So you have launched a subsidiary from nothing in Mexico, and now you've launched a startup from nothing in San Antonio. What has been harder? And
oh my gosh, definitely launching the startup.
And what has been similar?
What's been similar is so many things you don't know, right? So you don't know to plan for them because you just don't know what you don't know. And you discover something next week that you just hadn't known you had to consider. What do I know about D&O insurance, right? And I didn't have to know about that when I did the startup in Mexico or the subsidiary in Mexico. So there's always things you don't know, but when you're doing a subsidiary, you have an entire organization behind you that, you can sort of rely on. I could say, hey, I'm getting this, the import-export people are asking questions I don't have answers to, but I'm going to pitch them over the wall to corporate back in Ohio. You get none of that in the startup world. So that's why you have to, lean on your advisors, on your board for that, sort of expertise. But yeah, definitely harder to start up than the subsidiary. I guess, sort of not knowing is similar. And the fact that you have to build a team is similar. In both cases, you have to get together the people that are going to make it work. And if one of the things that I'm proudest of my career is that folks that I installed in Mexico are still there doing important work for Yaskawa, Mexico. And, that's very gratifying to know that, hey, you have an eye for talent. That's so important in the startup world. So bring them in, motivate them the right way, make them feel like they're part of something bigger, compensate them as they need to be, care about them and their families. Good things happen. That's the same no matter what your endeavor is.
This has been awesome, Erik. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. After the show, if people want to learn more about you or Plus One Robotics, where would you send them?
I would send them to plus1robotics.com, and you can, get a sense of the team, get a sense of the products, the sort of work that we do. Email us if you need to. There's always a link there, but always glad to connect.
Jay, we are not big robotics guys. We have not had a robotics company on the podcast yet. You didn't go to robot school, and neither did I. So I think it would be good to bring someone on to give us and the listeners a little bit of insight. What do you think?
I agree. So we brought in Nick Solero, an investment partner at the Columbus venture capital firm Drive Capital. One of Nick's focuses at Drive is its investments in robotics companies, of which the firm has made a handful in recent years. I've noticed anecdotally that Drive here in Columbus has been focusing on robotics. I reached out to their team to say, who's the best partner for us to talk to about robotics? And they said, Nick's our guy. So enjoy this short interview with Nick Solero. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
You're with Drive Capital here in Columbus and in the Midwest. And Drive seems to have taken an interest in robotics companies. Can you talk a little bit about that and whether that's a stated interest or just kind of happens to be the types of companies you guys are finding?
Yeah, so we tend to be very thematic in the way that we invest in at Drive Capital. We like to consider ourselves hunters as opposed to farmers. So we're proactively pursuing companies in very specific themes, and the trend towards robotics and automation is one of our most central themes here at Drive. We think that this is one of the most profound things that's going on in the technology landscape today, and it's something that I expect us to be investing in not just this year, but for multiple decades. Investing in robotics today feels a lot like what it would feel like to be investing in, say, computers in the late 70s, where we're at the front end of this massive adoption curve. And it's going to have all sorts of implications, not just for the ones that we know, but all sorts of things that are yet to reveal themselves.
I can think of some Wall Street Journal headlines for why robotics industry is so profound, but what are maybe some of the deeper reasons for why robotics at Drive?
Sure. So if you think about the context, right, and I think pointing to the PC as an analog is a helpful framework to understand what's going on. Thomas Watson, who is the founder of IBM, once said that his prediction for the global market for computers was maybe 5 or 6 units in the world, right? And what he was talking about at the time are what are called mainframes, right? So these were massive custom-built computers that took up an entire room, right, in a building. They did, maybe 1 or 2 things really, really, really well. And once those things were programmed, they were fixed and marginally useful. And so only the richest companies in the world that could afford to push the processes through those computers many, 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 many times, only for them did it make economic sense, because you had to amortize the cost of that very expensive machine over the hundreds of thousands or millions of operations that it would run through. But what you saw happen was that the era of mainframe computing gave way to the era of desktop computing and ultimately mobile computing. And so what was once fixed and expensive and purpose-built and narrowly useful became flexible and inexpensive and very broadly useful. And so the global market for computers went from Thomas Watson's forecast of maybe sub 10 units in the world to every desk in America, every home in America, and soon every pocket, dang near every pocket in the world. And I think robotics is on a similar trend. Robots have been around for many decades, just like mainframe computers have been around for many decades. And I think that we're in the midst of the transition from mainframe robotics to desktop robotics, right? To stick with the analog. Robotics historically have been big, very expensive, fixed automation, right? So the robots that you see in Detroit producing cars amount to very, very expensive capital expenditures that can do one thing really, really well. They're highly engineered and they cost lots and lots of money. So you need to be a company on the order of magnitude of a General Motors to justify the cost of installing all of those robots. But what's happening is similar to computers, the cost of the hardware and the flexibility inherent with the software is dramatically lowering that barrier to entry. So what was once fixed and caged and purpose-built and narrowly defined, which is historical mainframe robotics, is now lightweight and flexible and accessible and reusable because you have all of these converging threads on the technology side, right? Which is where we come in. So with rapidly increasing sensor packages, right, that are decreasing costs and increasing capability of the sensor packages, decreasing costs and increasing capability of the compute and software means that you can have very flexible automation, and therefore you can justify it in a lot more places, right? So where you look around, the ability to automate is going up and the cost of that automation is going down, right? So by definition, you're just going to see a lot more automated processes around you.
So let's say a robotics company comes to Drive Capital and says, we are J. Klaus Robotics. What's the progression of how you dig into that company to see if it's a fit for Drive? What types of things are you looking for in robotics specifically?
It's the worst robotics name I've ever heard, by the way.
So, if you look at Drive Capital's, take a step back, right? If you look at Drive Capital's website, you're going to see robotics companies, you're going to see software companies, you're going to see consumer companies, you're going to see early stage businesses and later stage businesses, things in Columbus, things outside Columbus. And you might ask yourself, well, gosh, what do all of these have in common? And for us, it boils down to really 2 things. common thread through all of our investments is a fundamental belief in two key characteristics. The first is that the company is going after a large market. For us, market size is very much our North Star, and it's for a very simple reason. Large markets have enough room to yield very big companies. So we want to invest in businesses that have the opportunity to become multi-billion dollars of shareholder value. And the best way to give yourself a chance at that is to start with a big market, right? It means you can be wrong and still end up with a big company. It means, even if you don't have the exact perfect product or the exact perfect pitch, there are enough customers out there for you to go and ultimately build that big company. If you start with a small market, even if you do everything perfectly, you're going to end up with a small company, right? So for us, it's market size is the first question we ask. And if we can't get past the market size gate, then we're just going to politely pass, regardless of how cool the product is. The second thing we ask is this company today, or do we think this company is destined to become the category defining company, right? So we want to invest in the number one company in the market, right? So if at the end of the day, we can build a portfolio of companies, all of whom are category defining companies in big markets, we think that's a recipe for generating some pretty nice returns. Answering that second question is difficult, right? It requires, and that's where the venture and venture capital comes from, is you're going to lean on your expertise or your hypotheses, your views of the future in order to create a best assessment of whether or not this company can become a category defining company. And that's where, market size is fairly easy to get at. It takes some very basic math and some very basic assumptions about what we know about the world as it exists today and in the near future. It's answering that second question that's more difficult. And that's where we spend a lot of time with the team. We spend a lot of time with the product. We spend a lot of time with the technology, because in order to create a category defining company, those things that evolves, that unfolds over the space of, 10, 15, 20 years. And so you need to have not just a really great product today, but one that is durably great, right? That there's some moat around or some product roadmap or some insight that no one else has that's going to enable you to put one foot in front of the other for a decade and at the end still emerge as that category defining company. And that's really where we spend time digging in.
How large is a large market?
So for us, and this is just us, right? We start a good kind of gut check is we ask we do a very simple thought experiment. We said, if you had 100% market share today, would you have at least $1 billion of gross profit every year from customers in North America, right? So if he said, all right, well, I'm in the widget business, and there's, if I had 100% market share of widgets, would I generate $1 billion of gross profit per annum? If the answer to that question is yes, that's the beginning of a big enough market, in our opinion. Because again, we want to invest in companies that have the ability to build $1 billion in revenue businesses, right? And, ideally, it's much larger than that. But that's the beginning of something that feels big enough to us. If your market is 500 million or 900 million and growing slowly, it's just get harder and harder. And I understand that part, especially in these emerging markets like robotics, your market size, strictly speaking, your market size today may be a little bit smaller, but if you kind of squint at it and you believe that this is a big shift that's happening, then that market should be rapidly increasing, and then we can get comfortable there as well.
Our guest today, Erik from One Robotics, he referred to the game that he's playing here as kind of a whale or elephant hunting world. He's going after a handful of giant companies that he would have to get customers to be the number one category killer. Do you see that as a pro or a con for a company where they need a small number of customers to be definitively the number one versus a lot of customers they need to have just the majority?
It's neither a pro nor a con. I think, at least in a strictly speaking sense, right? It's all going to be context dependent. If I think about robotics, I have a very strong view that in 10 years, 50, pick your long-term horizon, that there's going to be a great deal of things around us that are automated. That doesn't mean the adoption rate of automation is equal across all these different places. And if I look at who is buying, which parts of the market are the most rapid adopters today, it's folks in that kind of warehouse automation supply chain space. Amazon has basically set an impossible standard for the logistics business. And the e-commerce is growing rapidly as a portion of overall commerce, and Amazon is growing as a portion of e-commerce. And their ability to maintain their superior customer experience really relies on their ability to get you your product in almost a magical amount of time. And if you look at how they do that, they have rapidly automated a number of those processes on both a forward and reverse logistics space. And the rest of the world, the rest of retail, the rest of commerce basically has a fundamental fork in the road. They can either roll over and die, or they can compete on this new paradigm, right? And most of them are opting to compete. And the only way they're doing that is they're rapidly automating a number of the workflow processes, from basically receiving goods in bulk to then ultimately getting your order into a brown box and delivered to your doorstep. Many of the steps along that path are being automated, and that the big player, that's kind of the market that we're talking about here, and many of those logistics players are big companies, right? So, and they have the need not for 10 robots or 100 robots, but sometimes 1,000 or 10,000 robots. Right. And so that is a whale. That market right there is filled with a bunch of whales, for sure.
How important is technology in the robot space as compared to operations, marketing, sales, general business acumen?
Well, we come from a view that, we tend to favor technology over sales and marketing, because technology is how you build that durable lead, right? So that category defining company for decades is one that typically the foundation is a great product and a one that's not incrementally better, but then one that's a step function better. During my time when I worked at Google, Larry Page used to say all the time, we don't want to build products that are 10% better than our competition. We need to be 10x better. And so all of our ideas need to be kind of those 10x sorts of ideas. And I believe that to be true. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be good at sales and marketing and so on, but ultimately you need to have superior products. What's interesting in the automation space is a lot of the features that even just a small handful of years ago felt like science fiction are going to be table stakes, right? And so they will not be your key differentiator. To pick a specific thing, like self-driving cars. When I was at Google and the internal code name was Chauffeur, this was top secret stuff. They were building science fiction, but from then until now, and really in the not too distant future, self-driving cars are going to go back to being called just cars, because it's a feature that every single car has. And so if you're going to win, if you're going to be the most popular car, you're not going to differentiate on the ability to be self-driving, even though that is a amazing piece of technology. The same thing's going to happen in the robotics and automation space. Some of those early to market that are doing really inventive things around computer vision or autonomy, I like to describe it as robots transitioning from motion-driven to mission-driven, right? The old school robots basically are machines that are programmed to do a set of motions over and over again. And so what you're telling that robot to do is basically hit a bunch of waypoints. We're in the midst of transitioning to mission-driven, where you can give a robot a directive, right? Like move this thing from here to there, or separate all of the red widgets from the blue widgets. You don't tell it how to do that or how to make the movement. You give it a mission, and then you let it figure out how best to complete that mission. That is really amazing computer science, if you think about it. But those sorts of things won't be sustainably amazing. You'll have to continue to invent new applications or solve increasingly more difficult problems, and that's how we have progress.
I would guess that in the robotics space, since R&D is so much more intensive here, and often the physical product itself has a lot of cost to it, how does that affect your thinking as a venture capitalist and the amount of capital that you would have to put into a company like a robotics company?
It's certainly something to consider, right? The zero marginal cost and infinite scalability of just software is very attractive. That's why many investors shy away from things that have a hardware aspect. But it's most of especially at the beginning of the adoption curve, most customers they want to buy a full stack solution because they have an acute pain point that they need solved. We haven't yet had a maturation in the market where you start to have stratification of companies, where you have the hardware companies that are separate from the software companies that are from the platform companies, which are separate from the application companies, like you do in, say, PCs, right? So you have, Dell may make your computer, Microsoft may make your operating system, and then you're going to have, Adobe that sits on top of Windows. I think we'll get there eventually as everyone focuses on their core competencies. Ultimately, you want to be investing in the things that make you differentiated, and then, buying things that are not your key differentiators. But for now, a lot of these companies are going to need to deliver full stack solutions. And, it's just something that we need to be mindful of.
This has been awesome, Nick. If people want to learn more about you or Drive Capital after the show, where should they go?
Well, you can come to drivecapital.com and see what we're all about. Also, feel free to send me a note. I'm nick@drivecapital.com. We here in Columbus feel like we're building the robotics center of the universe. So please, by all means, come visit. We've got 10 companies, if you can believe it, here in Columbus, and that number is going to continue to grow. And, this is a great example of where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, because we're creating a real ecosystem here. So I encourage you to come visit. We also have our annual robotics and automation event here in Columbus in October called Duvall's Dance. So you can check it out at duvallsdance.com.
All right, Erik, we just spoke with Nick Solaro of Drive Capital. Let's dive back into the company at hand here, One Robotics. Where do you want to start?
I love the idea of the company. I love that there is this human augmentation, not human replacement factor, and that Erik was so adamant about that vision and that incremental benefit of +One. I also really like how Erik kind of segmented logistics robotics for us and made it easy enough that we could understand into mobility and manipulation. I also like how Erik segmented the history of robotics from what he's doing, and how what he was doing and how robotics has been is all about the arm. Now what he's doing is more about the eye and the hand. So Jay, what I really liked about this interview, and if you take those three things together, is the way in which robotics was explained to us in a way that I could readily and easily digest with very simple takeaways.
I just kept waiting for you to say, but here's what I didn't like. And you didn't. Just all things that you liked.
I'm usually more negative, I know. And I'm sure I have some negativity coming, but I really enjoyed that interview. It was one of my favorite to date. And I don't usually say that live on the podcast, so here we go.
Same. Even down to the cadence and just way Erik speaks, almost comforting. It just felt kind of comforting. It's like, you know what? I do understand this. I'm tracking with you. I'm here. I get it. I hear what you're saying. And honestly, that insight from Nick Solaro also very, very insightful for a short period of time. Gave us a lot of information there. And, part of the reason we do the VC mashup episodes is to get some of the information we just got from Nick right there. It changes the way I think about some opportunities. So I'm with you. I definitely know a lot more about robotics now than I did before. This opportunity seems, something I asked Nick was, this opportunity seems like +One has got to win some big, big clients, and there aren't a ton of them. So to me, that's kind of where this opportunity hinges, and whether or not, if we're looking at this through the frame of an investor, if that's the type of risk profile and reward profile that we're looking for.
Yeah, to me, and I mentioned this in the interview, it's almost like there's two paths that you can go down. Either you get purchased by one of those six as an acquisition, or you build out all six of them. So you have all six of them are your customers, and you're just minting money and robots for all six of them. I think, depending on the path you go down as an investor, that's how you would think about the valuation. Because Kiva, who we talked about, who Amazon bought, raised $18 million, which is a little bit more than +One, but they were purchased by Amazon for $750-ish million. So if you're going to get purchased by one of them, we can use what's called a comparables model or a comps model for valuation here, which is something we haven't really talked about much on the podcast.
Okay, I like where this is going. What is a comparables model?
So if we were doing a full comparables model, we would take a bunch of different comps and we would say, okay, this company was this far along and they sold for this much. This company was this far along, they sold for this much. And we would find things that were in the robotics space that were also sold to logistics type companies. Now, obviously, it sounds like the manipulation space is different than mobility, but at least gives us a proxy for what these companies are selling for. I didn't do that. I didn't go through and find a bunch of these and run some discounts, run some premiums, and find a range. But I think if we just use the Kiva Systems acquisition as a ballpark figure, we get that as a robotics company, you can raise under $50 million and you can sell that company if you have the right technology and the right buyer for $750 million. Call it $500,000 to $1 billion, maybe more because manipulation's harder. There's probably some adjustments you can make there. But I think what we're looking at is if you go the acquisition route and it makes sense and the technology works and the companies are excited about it, be that Amazon or FedEx or UPS or any of the other major players, there is a huge premium on that side. The side I'm less comfortable with is our typical build-up side here in the deal memo, which is we start with the unit economics, we figure out what the demand in the market and the total market is, and then we kind of back into some sort of valuation. And I don't have the numbers from that interview where I can say, okay, here's how many robots, here's how many warehouses, here's how many whatever, here's the price point. I'm missing a lot of information for me to be able to say, okay, if we sold to all 6 of those, what's the value prop? What's the valuation? What's the yearly revenues?
Yeah, at one point you asked the question that you're looking for the size and scale of how many of these machines go into a warehouse. You said, is this hundreds? Is this tens? And Erik said it's in the tens more likely than the 100s. But I'm with you. I didn't have hard numbers on how big that opportunity can be. I'm not familiar with this Kiva acquisition either. So what year was that and what was this company doing?
So Kiva makes these little robots that move around a factory floor. Really hard to explain, but it's almost like a little beetle that things can go on top of. And they can be programmed to move packages from one part of the factory to another. They were purchased in 2012 by Amazon. So it was a while ago. So my comps, if you were doing a comps model, you'd also look at history. So likely the number is higher than 775 million.
Yeah, I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle here, being that it's clear the industry is going this direction. It also seems clear to me that Erik's team is at the edge of it, if not the market leader. And so to me, that reeks of opportunity. Something that Erik took a stance on that I appreciate as an entrepreneur that gave me a little bit of pause as a potential investor is he says, I'm not here to do the Silicon Valley shuffle. I'm not trying to raise a seed, then a Series A, then a Series B, then a Series C, then a Series D. I'm not trying to move from San Antonio, Texas. And it also didn't seem that he was really angling for a quick exit either, which is kind of what your argument here is predicated on. However, it seems clear to me that there would be that type of opportunity. At some point, Erik's going to want to take something off the table, and so therefore an investor would also take something off the table at that point, I believe. So to me, it seems like a good opportunity to get in on as an investor, but I don't have that top market size. If you want to use this Kiva comparable, that does seem large. Sounds like it might be right at the edge that Nick was talking about of large enough for a fund like Drive to get involved, but pretty close to the edge.
I think that you look at acquisition in this context as when Amazon bought Kiva for $775 million, they probably thought they were going to get something like $5 billion of value out of it. What that means is that if you were to go this selling to all 6 route, there's probably a significant uptick in total addressable market. It's also a harder road, but it's definitely probable that you become bigger, and that number is significantly higher if you were to work the math and say, okay, Amazon has 75 distribution centers or fulfillment centers around the country, and UPS has this many, and this has this many, and let's get the total number of robots that we would need, just our pick one robots. This doesn't go into the other use cases that Erik talked about, but our pick one system, that's 750 for Amazon, and it's however many for UPS, and it's however many for FedEx. And then if we took the price of each of those and multiplied that, we would find, okay, this is what more of a market size looks like. And that number, I can almost guarantee, will be higher than 750 million.
And the fact that his Series A, he said that investment is to take the technology they have and apply it to the next circumstance within that realm that they're attacking, that logistics industry, sounds like they've already found and confirmed some level of product market fit for the first application, which I think is a good sign.
And now it's just time to run that sales funnel, which is this stage gate process. I do want to touch on one thing real quick about who led his Series A. From what I understand, Pritzker is a family office, JB Pritzker out of Chicago. And when you are a family office, you have different constraints on your investments. Your time horizon can be longer, for instance, because you're not at the behest of LPs and of fund mandates. Your money is your own, so you can invest it however you want. And I think that might be why Pritzker is leading this round, is that this is a longer vision.
For the listeners, something I want to shed light on because this was new to me until very recently. The term family office refers to essentially the funds within a high net worth family, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
So now I want to turn our attention to Erik as a founder. And I think we glossed over this and went to the opportunity because it's pretty straightforward that his background checks out for doing this exact type of thing and is probably one of a very small handful of people in the country, in the world, who know exactly how to approach this space and build this type of business. Did you get anything other than green flags in talking to Erik as a founder for this opportunity?
I think the fact that I only have green flags is probably at least a yellow flag, because if you only have green flags, that means that there is something that we're likely missing or we didn't ask that could have turned over something that was a little shadowy. So my biggest yellow flag, I won't call it a red flag, is that everything seemed in line. Obviously, one thing we don't really get to talk much about here on Upside is the idea of the actual technology. Does it actually work, right? But assuming that it does, like we do with every other company, I don't have any real yellow or red flags. What about you?
Yeah, my biggest pause, like I said, would be if I'm approaching this from the lens of an institutional investor and wondering, is Erik's interest in running this for the long term aligned with what my fund is trying to do with our investments? Similarly, will our fund invest in San Antonio? And if it's a J. Klaus fund, the answer is yes. But if it's not, that would probably be a problem for me if he's not willing to move or be closer to me or whatever. So for me personally, no, I got a lot of good indications. I'm with you on that. If I am totally bought in, I should probably be thinking harder or looking harder. But like you, I believe in the black box. The video on their website is really fun to watch. Listeners, I would recommend you go to the Plus One website, which is in the show notes, and watch the overview video of how Plus One works. But yeah, it's clear to me how he got into this opportunity. It's clear to me that he's committed. Like I said, he's committed to a degree that might even be problematic to some institutional investors if they're trying to just return their investment in 5 to 7 years. I believe that, he will be successful. Something that you started this deal memo off with was talking about how he was able to make this rather complex and new idea to us very simple. And I always use that as a benchmark of how well does this person understand the subject matter? Can they take it and make it very simple for me, someone coming to it new? And he did that in spades. So, yep, good marks for me.
It's almost like that benchmark that you have is almost like the opposite of Chris Dixon's idea maze.
Really? Tell me more.
Chris Dixon's idea maze is, how long can I talk to a founder about what they're doing effectively? That's like a really short way to put it together. But it's, all right, how do we twist and turn down every single potential path of this idea? And by talking to you, have you thought about this before, or are these new questions for you? So founders that really understand and know their business and idea have thought a lot about every problem. So they can go into every alley. But you're kind of saying what is unique to you is when a founder can pull back and say, here's the beginning and end of the maze. Don't worry about what's in the middle. But if you want to go there, we can jump in.
No, I'm not quite saying that. I like that idea that Chris Dixon is saying too. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I'm saying that taking complex ideas and being able to share them in a language that a layman would be able to understand, I think takes a level of understanding that an expert must have. That being said, I think that you can dive into any of those nooks and crannies and go deeper and still continue to take complex information, complex ideas, and simplify them in a way that I can understand going through the maze. I don't necessarily need like all encapsulating, here's the beginning, here's the end, here's all that there is. I just want to be able to talk to you and feel like I'm staying with you.
I just want to be able to talk to you and feel like I'm not an idiot.
Right. Seriously. But that's like true of, I think that's human nature.
I feel like the people who are the biggest cons make you feel like an idiot by using the biggest words.
Well, I just don't think it's good like, I don't think you're going to have a good outcome if you go into a pitch meeting and you're using language and saying things that you can't get your audience to understand. Would I invest in something that just I couldn't wrap my head around? Absolutely not. It might be new to me, but I better be able to understand it when you explain it to me.
So Jay, what are you looking for in the next 6 to 18 months?
I'm going to piggyback on one of Nick Solaro's points, where he says, one of Drive Capital's fundamental beliefs, is this company today or could it become a category-defining company, the number one company in that market? So I'm looking at indications for Plus One being the number one category company or number one company in the category of this logistics robotics for those big 6 firms. You know, those are long sales conversations. What are the indications on them? How are they going? He's got to be in contact with all of them already. So I'm looking to see how are those stage gate processes proceeding.
I think I'd be looking for the same, but for purposes of this deal memo, I will say, well, they raised this Series A not to do the sales side of things. He made that pretty clear. Instead, they raised it to look at new use cases. So I want to hear what those new use cases are. Are they effective? How are they getting the technology? What academics are they working with? Are they working with new types of institutions like Swery? How are they developing these new use cases, and what are they, and how do they fit into that stage gating process that is happening simultaneously?
We'd love to hear your thoughts, guys. Thanks again to Nick Solaro for being on the show. If you have ideas on Plus One or on the robotics industry, you can tweet at us at UpsideFM or email us hello@upside.fm. We'd love to talk to more robotics companies in different areas across the country. So if you have a lead on a good robotics company, you can email that as well to hello@upside.fm. And we'll talk to you next week. That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest. So shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter @UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind, bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire, used to run victory laps, and still I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep on rhyming, find a way and